Hi everybody. So we're going to start with is just a review of what's going to happen over the next few days. So you'll see we are right here, or I'm filming this on Monday, December 1st. Our next class is Wednesday, December 3rd. I will be gone December 5th. That is the day that writing assignment number 2 is due. So you'll post that to Google Classroom, and you should be pretty close to being done your memoirs by now. The other thing is remember to post to your reading logs. Those are worth marks. They're easy ways to get your grades up. Okay. The other thing I want to point out is that the recitation assignment is happening starting pretty much right now. You have about 2 weeks to deliver your speech. You're either doing it by yourself or you're doing it with a partner, and you will see that these presentation times will be made available to you on the log. So when you look at the log, you'll see here these recitation times, sign up form will be there and you'll be able to check it out. Okay, so today what we're working on is Hamlet Act 3 Scene 1. Okay, and here we go. Okay, so this scene of Hamlet, this first scene of Hamlet is monster. It's got 6 different parts to it, but we're going to be focusing mainly just on the to be or not to be speech. Okay, the first part is a conversation between the king and Polonius to use Ophelia as bait. This is important because both Ophelia and the queen are aware that they're being used, and it makes you wonder, like, is there any good characters in this play? Is everybody bad? And I would suggest that there is one good character. It also connects us to that essential question of pretending to be somebody you're not. Right? Ophelia knows that her dad and the king are eavesdropping when she's having a conversation with Hamlet. Second part is after the to be or not to be speeches, where Ophelia and Hamlet have their one and only scene where we get to watch what they say. There's a previous scene, if you remember, where he gave her a letter saying that he loved her, but we never got to see that. And so the only time we see them is when they're not getting along too well. So this is this scene right here. I also spelled Ophelia wrong there, which is embarrassing, but we'll get past that. And then after that scene with Ophelia, the king realizes that it's not Ophelia that's causing Hamlet to be mad, and he realizes that there's something else going on, and it's our first real clue that perhaps he's guilty of killing King Hamlet. Okay, so back to this thing about King and Polonius using Ophelia as bait. And Gertrude says that she hopes that Ophelia is the cause of Hamlet's madness. And she's optimistic for Ophelia. The king and Polonius hide as Hamlet enters. And so this is a very common, you're going to see this played out one more time, especially by Polonius. He spies on people. And remember that we've already had Polonius sending Rinaldo to spy on Laertes and pretending to be something he's not there. And the king sent 2 people to spy on Hamlet. Do you remember who they were? That was Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. So they're hiding, and they hear a conversation that Hamlet has with himself, a soliloquy, before he sees Ophelia. And so what that speech is to be or not to be. And so if you look down the center row here, this is all about to be or not to be. So here's a couple things you need to remember about to be or not to be. It's the third grade soliloquy of this play, and it is similar in tone to the first soliloquy. So if you remember the first soliloquy, that when we first meet Hamlet, he's super down in the dumps, he's depressed, his father's just died, his mother's married his uncle, and he is feeling depressed and suicidal. And then the second soliloquy, he decides that he's going to come up with this great plan, and the play is the thing to catch the conscience of the king. And he's motivated by the speech of the player king, who goes on the Hecuba speech. He's finally got some motivation to act. Time travel to this scene. Now he's down on the dumps again. And it starts, if I'm going to go a little bit specific on this, it starts with this question of to be or not to be. And so that could be interpreted in a number of different ways, but it could be to live or not to live, or it could be interpreted as to do something or to not do anything. to allow things to happen without doing anything. And that's the big question that you'll see over and over again is why does he not act? Why the delay? And it's not just a reference about whether he should kill Claudius, but it's also a question of why doesn't he kill himself? And what you'll see is he thinks too much. He talks his way out of it. To do something, what good would a sword or a spear be against a foe is too great to count, right? And that's what you get right here. The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arm against a sea of troubles, right? So you can't count how many problems there are, and by opposing end them. So die to sleep, and to say that we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. So being humanity, is to live a flawed life that is awful, and that the only thing you could hope for is to die. That maybe that'll take the pain away. But there's a problem, and that's where you get this there's the rub. To die, to sleep perchance to dream. Because you don't know, look at this part in pink, you don't know what dreams will come after you've died. So when we've shuffled off this mortal coil, that's a metaphor for once you've died, right? The mortal coil must give us pause. You have to think for a moment. That's why we live the awful reality of such a long life. And then this part in green kind of goes into, why life stinks. And so Hamlet's so depressed, he goes through all the things, but they're not wrong necessarily, but the whips and scorns of time. So we go through here, and he says, when he himself might his quietus make. So that means like when he himself, like when you could kill yourself with a knife, a bare bodkin. And then he goes on a little bit longer. We go to blue. And this part I really like. The undiscovered country, so that's death, from whose bourne no traveler returns. So nobody ever comes back from death. But that's not necessarily true when you think about the ghost, right? The ghost has come back from death to talk to Hamlet. Anyways, it says, puzzles the will. It makes us rather bear the ills, right? So that's why we deal with all the garbage that we deal with than fly to others that we know not of. Meaning that's why we deal with the realities of what we have here on earth rather than the unknown potential dangers that await us all when we die. And so this is a question of why does he stick it out? And this is an existential question about humanity. And this is why this speech in particular is so famous. So you have to remember that he's talking not just about acting on his father's request for revenge, but he's talking about why do we struggle through the reality of our daily life in the bigger picture. He seems overwhelmed, but it's his thoughts that are causing the problem, not anything on the outside. It's on the inside that's causing a problem. So he expresses a desire for fear and a scorn for himself. But there's nothing specifically said about his father, his mother, the king. Thinking makes healthy decisiveness sick, is essentially what's going on here. Okay, so back to the poplet. Gone through this part here. He seems to fall in love with the solution of killing himself at the end, but there's only one thing holding him back. So key thing about this speech is it goes back to the original mood. The tone of it is back to the first part of the play. And so you'll see that there's an up and down. Because right before, we thought that there was going to be, he was motivated to get his revenge. Now we're back to madness. We're back to his weird behavior. Okay, I think I've just gone over all of this stuff. He has a scorn for himself. He's thinking himself out of, right? It's this constant thinking that gets him out of acting on for revenge. Okay, so then he sees Ophelia. And this is basically weird, right? Because when we last found out that they were together, he gave her a love letter. He was dressed all weird. Maybe he was pretending to be crazy, though. We don't know. And then right after he discusses this weird speech with himself about death, he sees Ophelia, and this is where the king and Polonius are eavesdropping. And Ophelia's a pawn, remember? She's there to allow the king and Polonius to eavesdrop. And I actually think that she wants to be there. And so she offers to give back Hamlet's love mementos, but then he acts like he's never seen them before. Right here. She says, "My lord, I have remembrances of yours that I have longed to redeliver, so I want to give them back to you." And he says, "Not me, I never gave you anything." And so he's either, we believe, if everything's consistent, that he's pretending not to know who she is. Why would he pretend to not know who she is? There's two ways you could look at it. One could be maybe he's trying to protect her, or the other one is his antic disposition is making him not trust anybody. He asks questions like, "Are you fair?" Meaning, it could mean a couple different things, like, "Are you honest and fair?" And remember, she's there for a dishonest reason. She's pretending to be something that she's not. Going down, and then he says, "You should not have believed me, for virtue cannot so inoculate our old stock, but we shall relish it. I loved you not." He's saying right there that he did not love her, but he just gave her a letter that said that he did. And Ophelia is devastated. She says, "I'm the more deceived." And then he says, "Get thee to a nunnery." Now, this could mean a lot of different things. If you look up on No Fear Shakespeare, we go down here, "Get thee to a nunnery" literally means get thee to a convent, right? But if you look at this, nunnery could also mean a brothel or a whorehouse. So at that time, that word meant more than one thing. But one, basically, when you look at it, is why would you want to breed more sinners? So get thee to, if it's convent, that would mean that her chastity would be protected and she wouldn't give birth to any more people. And he has such a low opinion of humanity that maybe he's saying, get away from man so that you don't have to give birth to any more of us because we're all awful people. And then he goes on this tirade of self-loathing. "I am arrogant, vengeful, ambitious. Get thee to a convent." And then he says this really interesting line. He says, "Where's your father?" So remember when Rosencrantz and Guildenstern were having a conversation with him and he figured out, who sent you here? Notice again, he says, "Where's your father?" We know that his dad, dramatic irony, that Polonius is behind the curtain. She lies and says, "At home." But it shows how smart Hamlet is that he can figure out when something weird is happening. "Let the doors be shut upon him, that he may play the fool nowhere but in his own house," which I think is pretty a great line. She says, "Oh, heavenly powers, restore him," meaning, I wish the old Hamlet would come back. He storms off. And then you get this really key line from Claudius right here, where Claudius realizes his affections do not that way tend, meaning he's not crazy because he's in love with Ophelia. It was not like madness. There's something in his soul over which his melancholy sits on brood. So he realizes that something else is going on. "I do doubt the hatch and the disclose will be some danger, which for prevent." So he wants to get Hamlet out of there. "He shall speed to England for the demand of our neglected tribute." Back then, England had to pay money to Denmark as a protective way for Denmark not to attack England. And so he's thinking, I'll send Hamlet to get that money. Polonius says what he says, and then it shall be so. "Madness and great ones must not go unwatched." So that's the end of just one scene. It's a pretty monster scene. And if we go back here and just zoom in again a little bit, right? We've got the three parts. We've got King and Polonius using Ophelia as bait. Then you've got the to be or not to be speech here. Hamlet freaks out on Ophelia, "Get thee to a nunnery." And then he says, Claudius figures out that Hamlet's madness is for real. The one other thing I forgot to mention is this freak out on Ophelia is probably more of him being upset about Gertrude's behavior than Ophelia. And he's talking about beauty and how beauty can be a pimp. And it's the queen's beauty that attracted Claudius. She was an honest wife to King Hamlet, and now she's considered Claudius's whore. So perhaps, as it says here, when he says all these negative things to Ophelia about being a whore, which clearly she's not, maybe what he's really doing is talking about Gertrude through Ophelia. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. All right, that's it. There's a lot of information there. And please answer the questions on the Google Classroom in the comments section to show that you understood this lecture.